welcome back everybody to Cerebral Selects. I'm Scott Messick, your co-host for this week, and I'm here with Cerebral himself, Joey Krafczyk. How are you, Joey?
Can't complain, just enjoyed watching Monday Night Football, even though there was a lot of stupidity in that game.
Yeah, look, I love the Chargers, and obviously because I'm from Philly, I hate the Cowboys, so frustrating outcome, but look, it wasn't part of the Cerebral 7 this week, so I'm not going to worry about it. So let's go on to what we got right first, okay? Let's start with New England, Las Vegas. We had under 41.5. What was the final score? And let's talk about it.
Yeah, so the final score on that one was Raiders 21, Patriots 17. That one ended up getting a little closer than I would have liked because there was some fourth quarter touchdowns and such, but just for context, we had talked about streaks of teams going under every week, and the Patriots had gone under every week up until this week. Just based on that alone, really, it's a fundamental play. It's like, okay, we're just taking the under on the Patriots for now. And the Raiders, they hadn't broken 20 points all year either, so it was just a slam dunk under. It did work out, but if you actually watch the game, the defenses on both sides were actually worse than I would have thought. Raiders gained almost 400 yards, and just because of their red zone incompetence, they just kept getting field goals, but that over-under could have really busted easily if they were punching in touchdowns. So, in essence, what I'm saying is I think we kind of caught a break on that one a little bit.
We also had that game, we had Vegas giving 3 to New England, but we really sort of squeaked out a win there, correct?
Yeah, definitely. We squeaked out a win. It shouldn't have been as close as it was. I mean, like I said, the Raiders were just getting whatever they wanted. They only punted it 2 times the whole game. I feel like the Raiders was a really strong play. I feel like if they played that game 10 times, I mean, the Raiders, they cover 3 points 6, 7 times at least.
So 2-0, that feels good for a moment. Let's go to another of our wins, Detroit, giving 3 points to Tampa Bay. It's going to be fun to talk about Detroit all year. They're an exciting team, and look, Dan Campbell's amazing.
Yeah, so the Lions were favored by 3 at Tampa Bay, and the final score was 20-6, so they really got it done. They didn't dominate necessarily, but pretty fucking good. We've been seeing their defense has really turned it around this year, and you just have to go with what you see. And a team like Tampa Bay, even off of a bye, they're just so much worse than Detroit. You know, if you're giving Detroit the proper credit for how good their defense has been, how well oiled their offense had been, which was true before, but now they have both offense and defense working. And when you have a team that has both offense and defense working, it's a good team to bet on.
So look, in the NFC, you know, you have to give them their due, and it's really San Francisco, the Eagles, and Detroit, right?
For sure. This is going to be really good playoff picture for the NFC this year, and the playoffs will be really intense.
Arizona and the Rams. We had over 48.5. Final score was 26-9. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, this one was just a bit frustrating. The Cardinals moved the ball really, really well every time they drove it, and then they just kept settling for field goals. And then the same thing was happening with the Rams. That the first half, the score was 9-6. You can't predict that teams are just not going to be able to punch in touchdowns. Now, that being said, as the season goes on, the evidence a lot of the time is more clear when teams have red zone issues, but in the short sample at the beginning of this year, you know, it's still kind of culminating. Yeah, so this game, you know, there's a lot of offense, 750 yards of offense, and then, you know, the Cardinals got to the goal line through a pick in the second half, and then it was just basically over. So that one just didn't fall our way. I think it was the right bet. Both teams moved the ball. Both teams gained a lot of yards, but just a lot of field goals, and it came up short.
Next up is Minnesota at Chicago. Chicago was getting 2.5, even though they were the home dog. They lost 19-13. Let's talk about that. Close on the spread, but a loss nonetheless.
So this one was interesting. You know, my handicap of this game was that the Vikings offense without Justin Jefferson, not so good, and that absolutely was true. They only scored 12 points on offense. The Vikings got a defensive touchdown, so they had 19 total. I feel good about this bet, even though it lost. Justin Fields got his thumb dislocated, so the backup quarterback went in, and immediately he gave up that defensive touchdown. And despite that, they had a chance to go down and score at the end and win by 1. And, you know, the backup quarterback, you know, made a stupid throw, you know, deep. You know, it got picked off, and then that was the game. But nonetheless, you know, like I thought the Bears defense started playing better the last few weeks. I mean, it's relative, you know, to how bad they were. They're not great or anything, but It was a good effort by the Bears, but it just didn't fall our way.
So our last two picks came in the same game. And as I said to you, please be nice to my Eagles, but it turns out my Eagles were not that nice to you. We had two bets there. So we had Philly. Let's talk about that bet, which was a loss.
Things started off easy. You know, they were up 14-3 in the second quarter, but little did I know that would be the last time they scored. I give credit to the Jets defense. Where I accounted for the Jets defense was in the under. You know, I didn't think the Eagles would just run them right over and score 30-something points. You know, I figured, yeah, they'd give a good effort. They'd maybe get a turnover or two, but the Jets defense won the turnover battle 4-0, and that swung the outcome. A 4-0 turnover margin, you know, that is variance. It's a bit unlucky. I feel like the Eagles was still the right bet. The team that is a well-oiled offense that just runs over people, they still exist, but the Jets are maybe the only team they'll have to face that actually has a defensive line that can really make them question whether they want to run the ball. And Hurts was dropping back and, you know, having to make throws, and he had been so consistent up until this point. You know, we didn't think that he was fallible, but it turns out even he has bad games. So credit to the Jets, and yeah, they got it done.
Now, we also won on a Philly Jets bet, which was under 42. Let's talk about the under.
I thought the Jets would have a longer day than they did. They lost their best offensive lineman this week, and I thought the Eagles would just have a heyday on their offensive line. But to their credit, the Jets, they held it together. Where the under did come into play was the Eagles' defense. They bent, but they didn't break. The Jets got 4 field goals on all those drives. The only touchdown they got was at the end there after the turnover. They were set up deep in Eagle territory. I figured the Jets would have a hard time getting points. That absolutely was true. So yeah, when you just have two behemoths of defenses like this, the under is usually a good play, and it hit with flying colors.
Okay, so that's our Cerebral 7. We were 4-3, which, look, we're on the positive side of 500, which is always good. Where do we stand for the year so far, Joey?
See, on the year, after week 6, we are now 24, 15, and 3. So 24 and 15 breaks down to 61.5%. So we're on track for a pretty solid year overall.
Now, we just watched the game, both of us, and it was Cowboys-Chargers. Cowboys pull it out 2017. Let's just talk about that game a little bit and why that was a good stay away.
Yeah, so the Cowboys were favored by 2.5 at the Chargers, and my recommendation was to stay away. Lo and behold, the Cowboys won by 3, so that could have gone either way. Obviously, it was close the whole game. The score was basically tied the whole game. You know, it was an even matchup, and yeah, it unfolded exactly how I thought it might.
There's our 4-3. There's our stay away. Let's talk about what we learned. 2 or 3 things that we learned this week that you're going to take forward into next week when you're, you know, making your picks.
Yeah, after 6 weeks of football, the sample is growing, and we pretty much know who everyone is now. So the Jets defense had a lot of lapses early in the season with some tough matchups and some adverse situations, you know, with having to have a backup quarterback. But their defense, they're buying in again. They're finally getting it together. And the game against the Eagles was definitely a reminder to everyone that this is one of the best defenses in the league. So what we learned this week was definitely the Jets defense. They're still for real. And despite some early slip-ups, they're going to make some noise. We also learned that the Commanders, their defense is not good. Last year they had a similar situation where their defense started slow and got better. So I'm not going to be shocked if that happens again, but after week 6, if your defense isn't good, I'm not going to just count on it getting better. And that's really the difference between people who just look at final scores and people who watch every snap of every game. The Commanders absolutely did not outplay the Falcons. Desmond Ridder kept throwing picks, but when it came to the Commanders' offense versus the Falcons' defense, the Falcons held them to 200-some yards, like a very low number. And the Falcons should have won easily, but, you know, that's how this league goes, you know. And the third thing we learned this week is that the Browns absolutely have the best defense in the league. I had some doubt in my mind just based on who they were playing the first few weeks, but after shutting down the Niners and ending their march on the league, scoring 30 every week and winning every game, it's over. They lost, and it was a little lucky, but hey, the Browns defense put them in the position to maybe get lucky and have them miss a field goal, so credit to them.
Okay, that's it for what Joey got right and what Joey got wrong. To all you subscribers out there, I'm Scott Messick. And Joey, thank you very much for letting me co host the Cerebral 7.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. And I know we haven't had a 6-1 or 7-0 week yet, but it's coming. So I'm looking forward to next week.